60 years later, in 1290 BCE, a new woman will use the position of God's wife to gain authority. But this woman adds the element of seduction. Nefertari. The very sound of her name evokes beauty, splendor, and sensuality. She is the most desirable woman in the ancient world. Nefertari's story is one of sex, power, and intrigue. When she is barely a teenager, she catches the eye of a young co-regent named Ramses II, who will soon rule Egypt as Pharaoh Ramses the Great. Ramses will have all the power one man could want, but he lacks one thing: divine lineage. His forefathers were soldiers who became pharaohs using military might. Ramses wants to be a god, and the key to his desire is the god's wife. If Ramses can marry a god's wife of Amun, that would make him the earthly embodiment of Amun, thus becoming a god himself. But first, he has to resurrect the position of God's wife. In Luxor, he honors them by incorporating his temple into a monument built by the greatest god's wife, Hatshepsut. And in the Theban necropolis, he restores Deir el-Bahari, Hatshepsut's funerary temple. By exalting the god's wives and marrying a god's wife, Ramses elevates his own status and the position of God's wife. It is a position that Nefertari desires. But to become God's wife, Nefertari must stand out from Ramses' 20 other wives and 1,000 concubines. What is the secret of her seduction?
Ancient Egyptian women were very fond of their makeup, just as women are today. Now, Nefertari, like other royal women as well as noble women, clearly used cosmetics to enhance her own natural beauty. And as well as cosmetics, she would have used wigs and clothes that would have helped make her look much more attractive to her husband, especially since he had so many other alternative wives.
Dr. Salima Ikram is an expert in the art and science of ancient Egyptian cosmetology. Many of the ingredients from an ancient Egyptian woman's cosmetics box are still available today in the Cairo spice market. Henna from the Delta region of Egypt is used to dye hair and to color feet. And galena, or kohol, a mineral found in the eastern desert, is ground up and applied as a line to the inner eye.
Kohl was applied with a stick, and you can see that you get different cosmetic lines from pulling out.
During the time of Nefertari, the eye line extended far back to the ear. The Egyptians associated eyeliner with ritual purity. Priestesses wore it and even used it to anoint statues of the gods. Malachite, crushed to a powder and mixed with goose or ox fat into a creamy paste, is spread upon the eyelid. Next is rouge, for which there's not much evidence in antiquity, except in the tomb of Nefertari.
In Nefertari's tomb, you see that the rouge is made in a most deliberate way, perhaps because she wanted people to know that she could afford rouge and she was wearing it because she was someone who was remarkably special.
Another important item of seduction from Nefertari's cosmetics box is lipstick. Lipstick is made from the same ground-up ochre substance as rouge, mixed with lettuce seed oil. As a finishing touch, Nefertari would use perfume. Today, as in antiquity, Egypt produces some of the most aromatic aphrodisiacs in the world.
And these would have been applied, again, mixed with oil or fat, and then could be applied all over the body, and in fact, sometimes in the hair as well, mixed with oil, so that people would smell quite fragrant. Clearly, in a country that is very hot, one does sweat a lot, so smelling fragrant becomes quite an important civic duty.
Perhaps the most tantalizing article in a royal woman's arsenal is clothing. The paintings of Nefertari depict her in a translucent linen dress. The painting is so good and the linen is so fine that one can see right through to her skin.
Royal women would have had some of the finest clothes available to anyone in ancient Egypt, and Nefertari would have had especially fine linen that is wrapped close to her body, and it's very transparent, and you can see sort of layers and layers and then tantalizingly bits of flesh through the linen. And this would have been, of course, very erotic and evocative, and certainly would have made her very alluring and irresistible to Ramses II.
With her erotic fashion sense, enticing perfume, and ravishing beauty, Nefertari is chosen by Ramses to be God's wife. She takes her power to newfound heights. During the 33rd year of their marriage, Ramses honors her in one of the world's most imposing temple complexes, Abu Simbel. Carved in the cliffs near Egypt's southern border with Sudan, the first temple facade contains 4 gigantic statues of a seated Ramses the Great. On the second temple are 6 colossal standing statues. Soaring nearly 30 feet high, they are among the largest in all of Egypt. In an act extremely rare in ancient Egypt, Ramses depicts Nefertari equal to him in stature.
Nefertari had special status at the small temple of Abu Simbel. She's depicted in colossal statues on the facade of the temple, where you'd normally only expect to find statues of the king, and inside she's shown offering directly to images of deities, and this too is something which normally only the king is shown doing.
As God's wife and Pharaoh's wife, diplomat and lover, Nefertari stood equal to Pharaoh Ramses for 25 years of his reign. Then, at the age of 46, Nefertari falls ill and dies. Ramses would rule for another 42 years, but he would never forget his lifelong love. To mourn her passing, Ramses constructs Nefertari's House of Eternity, a lavish tomb in the Valley of Queens. The temple walls are ablaze with colorful hieroglyphs, earning the temple its modern nickname, Egypt's Sistine Chapel. It is considered the greatest tomb ever found in ancient Egypt. With it, Nefertari achieves the ultimate honor, immortality. But the glory that Nefertari and Ramses II bring to Egypt does not last. 100 years later, by the time of Ramses VI, Egypt is crippled by weak rulers and civil unrest. Warriors from Nubia invade, and for the first time in its history, roles are reversed, and Egypt is conquered by its southern colony. It is 1150 BCE, and a familiar power is about to re-emerge, the gods' wives of Amun, but this time they are black women from Nubia. Before the new black pharaohs can continue their conquest of northern Egypt, they must secure the southern city of Thebes. To do it, the Nubian kings cunningly resurrect the position of God's wife. They bestow the title upon their daughters with the hope of expanding their own power. But over time, the daughters transform their religious power into political power and usurp the rule of the pharaohs. At the Medinet Habu burial complex in Thebes, Egyptologists are now revealing the extent of power wielded by the gods' wives.
The most important of the gods' wives are buried here at Medinet Habu. These were very, very powerful women who represented both political and religious power. They ruled Egypt as kings. These women were from Nubia, from what is today Sudan, and under their rule, they reunified Egypt and ushered in a period of renaissance in arts and culture and politics that lasted for over 500 years.
The location of the God's Wife chapels begins to indicate the power of these Nubian women. Across from an early monument constructed by Pharaoh Hatshepsut, and along the procession route to a temple built by Pharaoh Ramses III, the God's wife, Amenirtis, built her funerary chapel. But the true indicator of her power is in the chapel courtyard, where she is depicted in the ancient tradition of gods and kings.
The fact that the gods' wives really ruled as kings is very evident in these scenes from their tomb chapel at Medinet Habu. Here we have Shepenwepet, one of the gods' wives, before the gods Re-Herakti and Isis. And here it's very clear that she is the same height as these gods. And this is extraordinary because people who are not kings or queens will be shown shorter than the gods. Another symbol of the rulership of these women is here. Here is a representation of Amenirtis, another of the gods' wives. And on her forehead, she wears the snake. It's called the uraeus. And this is a symbol of royalty. Another indication is that her name, Amenirtis, is here encircled in a cartouche, in an oval. And this is, again, a prerogative of kings and queens.
The gods' wives are frequently depicted wearing the double feather crown, a royal headdress that symbolized authority over the two kingdoms of Egypt. Inside Amenirtis' temple, Teeter discovers further evidence of the gods' wives' kingly power. Here, Amenirtis presents offerings directly to Amun. It's an honor reserved for only a king. And in two similar scenes, Amenirtis offers sacrificial bulls to a statue of Amun, while devotees of Amenirtis offer sacrificial bulls to a statue of the god's wife. The iconography suggests the status of the god's wives is equal to the gods.